Hello, everybody. Pastor Mike here from Project Re3, back with you once again. And today I wanted to speak to you a little bit about disappointment. See, that's kind of what I'm feeling today, as probably a lot of you guys are. My disappointment actually started with a great event back on May 27th, 2017. You see, I grew up the biggest pro wrestling fan. If it was on television, I watched it. For about 12 or 13 years, I didn't miss a show. And then life happened. You get married, you start to have kids, you kind of grow up a little bit. And that part of my wrestling childhood kind of got pushed back into the closet. Well, then May 27th, 2017 happened. The WWE came to our local town and was putting on a house show. And a good friend of mine gave me a couple of tickets. So I asked our oldest son if he would like to go to this wrestling event with me. And he looked at me in all sincerity and said, "Dad, why do I want to go see that fake stuff?" So I said, fine. So after disowning him, I went to my second child, Maria, my daughter. And she said, "Dad, I would love to go." Maria didn't know anything about wrestling. She had never seen wrestling before in her life. She couldn't have told you one wrestler that existed on this planet. So her and I went, kind of a father-daughter date night, and we went over to the Greensboro Coliseum and took in the WWE show. She sat there the whole time with her eyes like as big as softballs, watching it, her mouth open, loving every second of it. When we got home that night, she kept asking me more and more questions about wrestling. And then sure enough, that Monday, she turned on Monday Night Raw, and she has never turned it off since. Wrestling has become her obsession. Her walls in her room are covered with WWE superstars and their autographed pictures and posters. We've been to, I don't even know how many events. Last year alone, in 2019, I think we counted up, we went to like 15 or 17 different wrestling events. She loves it. She's counting down the days until she turns 15 in just a couple of months, so that she can go and join our local pro wrestling school here, AML Wrestling. She loves it. So Beth and I, we couldn't wait to give her her Christmas present a few months ago. We went all in, and we got her tickets to the granddaddy of them all. We got tickets to WrestleMania. Maria sat there and cried, literally cried, tears of joy as she realized she was going to get to go see her biggest idols on the biggest stage of them all. So for the last couple of months, that's what we've been planning. We bought our plane tickets, we booked our hotel, we were planning all of our WrestleMania week activities. And today, Thursday, April the 2nd, we were supposed to have boarded a plane and headed down to Tampa. Well, unless you've been living under a rock, you know what's been going on in our world. Everybody's quarantined. Everything has been shut down. And WrestleMania, they're still having it. But they're having it with no fans. Maria was heartbroken when she found out. Those tears of joy that she shed on Christmas morning became tears of agony when she walked down the hall, practically running down the hall to Beth and I, screaming, "They canceled WrestleMania!" Well, we let her live with that disappointment and that sting. Used it as a life lesson that, you know what? Sometimes in life, things don't always work out the way that we thought they would. But sometimes you have to move on. So I've thought a lot about disappointment this week, knowing what this week would have represented in our family as Beth and I and Maria should be on our way to Tampa right now. I thought about her as a young girl, having these dreams and these hopes and things that she loves and pours her life into, taken away. And I know what we're experiencing with not being able to go to WrestleMania is so tiny compared to what many of you are going through. We're not suffering with the disappointment of a loss of a job or a loss of a loved one and not being able to tell them goodbye because you can't get into a hospital. We're not dealing with the disappointment of maybe a paycheck and how we're going to pay these bills. The disappointment of weddings that have been postponed or canceled. The disappointment of graduations. High school and college kids not being able to walk or to finish their classes or to go to a prom. You see, disappointment is a very hard pill to swallow. And for all of us, we will experience it in our lives. And as I've thought about it this week, it's really no different than what the folks in the Bible, the scriptures that we read, what they experienced. Whether it was John or Moses or David or Jacob or Hannah, heck, even Jesus, they all experienced disappointment in some way. Now, it doesn't mean that you're angry at God. You can be disappointed in God and not angry. But I think the thing that we have to kind of realize is that even through disappointment, even through those biblical heroes and characters, through their disappointment, they were still able to overcome those disappointments and accomplish great things. And I think sometimes in our life, we have to realize that when life doesn't work out the way we thought they would, it doesn't mean that we can jump on that emotional roller coaster and we can ride it wherever it goes. It's also important that we realize that maybe it wasn't God that disappointed us. That maybe it was just life's circumstances, or maybe it was certain people that we put our trust and hope in that disappointed us. You see, when bad things happen in life, it's easy to want to blame God. But in reality, those are the times that we should want to run toward Him. So as Maria's been dealing with her disappointment as a child, wanting and not getting to see her wrestling heroes this week at WrestleMania, as Beth and I have been dealing with disappointment of having one of our kids so sad. There's some things that have kind of come to mind, some things that I've been kind of working through and helping Maria work through, some healthy ways to deal with our disappointment. I think the first thing we have to do is we have to mourn our disappointment and then release it to God. It's okay to say you're disappointed. It's okay to say, I'm disappointed this didn't work out. It's okay to feel that moment, but you can't let that disappointment linger in your heart, or it's going to turn into depression or turn into despair. That's why you have to mourn it. You have to own it. You have to feel it. But then you have to let it go. You have to release it to God. I think the second thing we have to do is we have to evaluate and adjust our expectations. Because if we go through life thinking, especially a lot of believers are this way, that, hey, we're Christians, we're believers in God, everything's always going to work out, those disappointments are going to hit us the hardest. Because life isn't fair. Life isn't about always getting exactly what you want just because you believe in God and you're trying to serve Him and obey His commands and love others the way that you should. You see, I think assessing our disappointment, why are we disappointed, will tell a lot about where maybe we've put our hope and faith. Because sometimes people or events disappoint us, and maybe they even shatter us. But maybe it's because we put too much hope and faith and trust in them and not enough in God. And I think lastly, after we mourn and release it to God, after we evaluate and adjust our expectations, I think the third and last thing we got to do is we got to get moving. You got to get moving. You can't wallow in your disappointment. Wallowing is not productive at all, and in fact, it can be very, very harmful. So after you've mourned, you've got to let it go. Reassess how you even got to that point, make necessary adjustments, and move on. Look to the next day. Look to the next week. What good can come out of this? I mean, the scriptures are loaded with promises of God as we deal with our disappointments. In fact, Psalm 34:19 says this: a righteous man may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from all of them. Romans 8:28 essentially says, look, God will use your disappointing situations for good. And one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible, John chapter 16, verse 33, says, I have told you these things so that you may have peace. This is Jesus speaking. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And as my boy Adam Cole would say, that is undisputed.